It's Women's History Month, and at Wikimedia UK, we're celebrating the great women and projects that are working to close the gender gap on Wikipedia and its sister projects. Stay tuned for interviews and blogs, and follow the links in the description for ways to get involved. Today, we're joined by Kira.
My name is Kira Wisniewski. My pronouns are she, her. I live on Piscataway land. My address is in Baltimore, Maryland, and I have the honor and privilege of being involved with Art and Feminism as the role of executive director.
How is your project tackling the gender gap on Wikipedia and its sister projects?
So Art and Feminism has always been a community-based project, and I think the short answer is that we create tools with community as our North Star for anyone who shares our values to be able to use in tackling the gender gap. But of course, there's a longer answer to this too. A phrase that we often use is do it yourself and do it with others campaign that teaches people of our all gender identities and expressions to edit Wikipedia. So we create our guides and resources with a feminist pedagogy in mind and cater to a beginner audience. And since 2014, over 18,000 people at more than 1,260 events around the world have participated in our editathons, resulting in the creation or improvement of more than 84,000 articles on Wikipedia and sister projects like Wikicommons and Wikidata. But of course, there's still more work to do. And in the past year or so, we've really been asking ourselves, what does art and feminism look like beyond editathons? And so we've been doing a variety of initiatives to kind of answer that question. So first and foremost, we're still focused on nurturing and building our community. We issued a community care statement in November that basically asks our organizers is like, what is safest for the most vulnerable people in your community? So sure, your local government might have opened up cultural institutions, and that museum that you've worked with before might be open, but is that what's really safest for instance, the security staff at that museum, or elderly or immune compromised people who might be attending your in-person event? And so with that in mind, we've developed a virtual meeting guide that's currently available in English and French, and then also soon to be Spanish. And so like with that in mind, also, we've been really investing in translations in general. So in 2020, even with the pandemic, we had events in 6 continents, in 27 countries, and 20 languages. Right now, our new website is available in 4 languages, which are English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. When doing the web redesign process, we explored machine translation plugins, but really they're not adequate because machine translations are often literal, so translations don't always make sense. And machine translations also default to the masculine, and we really strive for our translations to be gender neutral. So we have in the works right now style guides for translation, and we recommend this as part of the Wiki Strategy 2030. Yeah, we're involved in some research projects right now that are specifically about these gaps. So one is funded by WikiCred. It's called Reading Together, Reliability and Multilingual Global Communities. And so this is really focused on reliable source guidelines. And so it's looking at these policies in English, French, and Spanish Wikipedia. And so it's examining questions like, what are these guidelines? How is a reliable source defined? And what is the impact of these guidelines on the content about marginalized communities and the editors in these 3 Wikipedias? And so that's a white paper that's being produced right now. And then another research project that's just getting started is about gender and cultural diversity in Wikicommons. So whereas Wikipedia's gender and cultural gaps are well documented, there's less data right now about information imbalances on Wikimedia Commons. So it's like right now, if you were to look on Wikicommons for doctor, it's by and large cis white men. If you look up dogs, it's going to be mostly breeds in like Western cultures. So we're taking a look at the cultural diversity and gender diversity in Wiki Commons as well.
What would be most valuable to you to help your project expand or increase its impact?
This is a great question. And I think that there are a lot of ways that I could answer this. But one thing that I'm thinking about in general, and one of the first things that comes to mind, is being able to pay people equitably. It's been something that Art and Feminism has been pretty vocal about since its origins. So, you work in Wiki, everybody who's watching this is probably already a Wikimedian, but the fact of the matter of Wikipedia being the result of like over 40 million people volunteering their work to a giant open source, peer edited trove of knowledge is incredible. But it leads directly into the questions of who has the resources to volunteer. Because in some countries and cultures, volunteering to do this kind of labor isn't the norm. And even in the US, where I'm based, volunteering is prevalent, but especially during this pandemic times, folks have less bandwidth to volunteer and fewer hours to devote to like this very screen heavy work when everything's online right now, right? Like many people, their day-to-day job, their fitness, their therapy, their social is all online. And so volunteering to do more screen time that bandwidth is less. And then also thinking about like the labor precarity that's been made worse by the pandemic, which is statistically disproportionately affecting cis and trans women. And it's even worse for non-white women. There's been many reports about how Latina and Black women are losing their jobs in record numbers. And so thinking about all of that and like who has the resources to volunteer really, I think, goes to the gap, right? So we also think about like the Art and Feminism program manager has highlighted this with the precarity of what many nonprofits face is having paid staff like you and I be administrators of a program while relying on unpaid labor. And that's not to say that you or I should be not paid, because we should be paid for our work too, but really it's like, how can we also pay others? And I think that is something that would really help expand and increase the impact of our work if we're able to pay people equitably. There's other ways too that could help the project as well. And there's some work that's already in process by the Wiki movement that we as an organization strongly support. So for instance, the Universal Code of Conduct, creating Art and Feminism has always had a brave friendly space agreement that we put forth and uplift at all of our events, but having the culture of the Wikiverse kind of adapt to a universal code of conduct, I think could be very positive for our work. And just creating that safe space for people to feel welcomed and able to do this work is really important part of that community building that we really try to focus as a North Star in a lot of ways. And there's other things too that part of the Wikimedia strategy that I'm very hopeful for, that I think can really kind of increase that user experience. Also doing things like we've talked about, like in terms of like maybe a universal translation guide. We've something else we've recommended for the Wiki strategy as an organization is doing some universal training on things like soft skills, like restorative justice practices, like things like that could really make Wiki a more welcoming and inclusive community that could really help the work of not only our organization, but I think like the work of everyone working in Wiki.
What are you most proud of?
I'm really proud of the Art and Feminism community. Our leadership team, board members continually ask us important questions and push us to be better. And that is what makes us be in a position to better serve our community. So I'm proud that we exist in a space that pushes us to be better.
Fantastic.
My shortest answer of all of my answers.